Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Mobalytics video. Today we're taking a look at 3 of the best champions for every role in patch 12.3. 12.3 was a fairly big patch and there has been quite a few changes. Bot lane has not changed quite so much, but everywhere else has seen some changes since that big itemization shift. So let's kick it all off in the top lane, and the first choice of this list is going to be Riven. The itemization changes actually benefited Riven quite a lot. Most of her items now have more AD at the cost of a bit of health, which already is a damn good trade-off. Riven has always preferred that extra AD for more damage, and his shield on her E also scales with AD too, so it's pretty much a win-win. Almost all of the items that Riven prioritizes have been given more damage. Gore Drinker, Black Cleaver and Ravenous Hydra are to name a few. Then her other slightly more defensive choices like Death's Dance and Mortal Mortius have also been significantly buffed too, and they are absolutely absurd on this champion. Riven's items are all about two main things, bringing up her damage and bringing down her cooldowns, which all of these new changes lean towards massively. Now Riven has actually never really had a high win rate due to the fact that she's pretty damn difficult to play, but right now her win rate is actually sitting at around 54% in Plat Plus. Riven is a very mechanically demanding champion with a very high skill ceiling, but her playstyle is fairly simple. She's all about maximizing damage by spamming her abilities and weaving her auto attacks alongside them. Riven's all-in potential with her ultimate is huge, and it can easily allow her to 1v2 or even 1v3 if she plays it perfectly. Riven's ability to snowball games generally is why she's always been so strong, but in this patch especially so, as the new items just feel so much better on her. If you enjoy this champion and can get used to her animation, cancelling and combos, she's a definite winner in this patch. Next up we've got Gwen, and she's been strong for quite some time now, and we all know just what she can do in that late game. Gwen's ability to absolutely destroy entire teams with just her ultimate in the late game is just second to none. The champion scales like an absolute animal. Gwen's itemization hasn't been touched for so long, and when she gets that Riftmaker and Nash's Tooth combo, she just becomes a bit of a monster. Gwen's early game is still relatively up and down. Some matchups are kind of tough due to her weaker early game, but if you can get through them, you're going to have a great time. The main thing about Gwen is efficiency. Can you play those early fights well enough to contribute without overcommitting whilst you're a bit weak? Can you compete with the likely advantage that your enemy top laner has in the early game? If the answer is yes, Gwen will easily carry you in the mid to late game. Gwen is best when paired with allied champions who can contribute to some kind of crowd control, as Gwen has none in her own kit. Gwen does however though have an amazing ability in her W, which is fantastic when receiving lots of attention. If you find yourself getting dove early game, which will happen fairly often due to your weakness there, you can use this tool to outplay your opponents and often come out on top, especially when paired with the healing from your passive and Conqueror. Overall, Gwen is just in such a good spot this patch. She's near enough unmatched when it comes to scaling top laners right now, especially those with magic damage, and that's one of the main reasons she's been so heavily prioritized in pro play. The third and final top laner for this patch today is going to go to Aurelia. Yes, one of the most popular champions in the entire game that everyone thinks they can play is back with a bang, and honestly, it's all due to that Blade of the Ruined King buff. She has finally got back her juicy win rate, and despite being difficult to play, people are lighting up the rift with her again this patch. Every single time Blade of the Ruined King gets buffed, there are a selection of champions that cannot believe their luck. Aurelia and Jax are probably the most obvious two that come to mind, but Aurelia has just got this place ahead of Jax due to her win rate soaring. Aurelia's main attraction, aside from just how fun she is simply how hard she can dominate her lane opponent when she plays it correctly. She can all in super early and often, and if she does get a kill lead, she can probably just dive you again and again on repeat. Aurelia's Q means she can dart through waves and constantly poke and burst you down whenever she fancies it, and if she changes her mind, all she has to do is leave one minion behind for her Q to fall back on. Aurelia's ultimate also contributes to just how good she is at diving those turrets when she gets a few kills, and she can easily kill both her lane opponent and the jungler if she plays it well enough. Everybody knows just how strong a good Aurelia player can be, and when you combine that with a period in the game where she's got good itemization and strong overall, you've got a true terror from that top lane. Moving on to the jungle now, and these choices might not be so surprising. The first one is Hecarim. So Hecarim is still untouched this patch, and he's just as ridiculous as ever. Hecarim mains are still laughing their heads off at the fact that this Chemtank Muramana build is still not been nerfed so far this season. We covered this build in a video a few weeks back, so be sure to check that out if you're wondering what all the fuss is about. Hecarim's damage is just ridiculous, and if the person playing them knows their limits and is aggressive enough, he can genuinely 1v9. Hecarim not only has a ton of damage, but his map mobility and jungle clearing make him a step above almost all of the other junglers in the game at the moment. He clears ridiculously fast, and due to his kit and his itemization, he can get to fights in an instant, making him undeniably more impactful than his opponents. Hecarim's ability to zoom around the map, one-shotting everything in his path and clearing the jungle at the speed of light keep him in that top spot for the time being. and if there's no nerfs coming his way anytime soon, we're unsure if this will change. Diana is yet another jungler that's been dominating for multiple patches now. Ever since Riot buffed her again, she's just been unstoppable. Diana's clear speed is just way too fast, especially when she's got her Nashor's Tooth. Due to her passive, she just one-shots most camps, and there's absolutely no competition when you're trying to keep up your farm against her. She can get so farmed off this alone that when you factor in her high damage ganks, there's just no stopping her from getting tons of gold a lot faster than you. Diana not only has a ridiculously fast clear and effective ganks, but she also has one of the most influential ultimates from any jungler in the game. Once you've got a few items, you E into a team and press R. The product of this is basically winning team fights by yourself. The second you see your enemies clumped up and grouped, you dash in and destroy any hopes they ever had of winning the game. Diana is just so difficult to deal with when she gets the lead. Her damage becomes impossible to play against, and her mobility makes her almost impossible to escape from too. Diana has just got so many pros and very little cons at the moment. You power farm, you scale incredibly quickly, and you 1v5. It really is as simple as that. The last jungle selection of the day is going to Xin Zhao. Xin Zhao is another champion who's been very popular in recent patches and recent seasons. Xin truly loved the Gore Drinker Conqueror meta last year, and he's still very strong with it now. So Xin was doing pretty fine this season. He was still very hard to kill, and he was also doing a lot of damage. But then Riot decided to buff Death's Dance, and now it's made him completely broken. If Xin wasn't killable before with his self-healing, his Gore Drinker and his Styrax Gauge, Death's Dance has made him feel immortal. If you didn't know by now, they've changed this item so that it now staggers both physical and magic damage too. They've also changed the way you heal from this item, and it is even more abusable for this champion now. As soon as you've completed Gore Drinker, you rush Death's Dance as soon as you can. If you add in Xin Zhao's ultimate to the equation, which gives him even more survivability, you simply cannot stop him. Xin Zhao is in a very strong position so far this patch and definitely shouldn't be forgotten about. If you manage to have the unfortunate experience of playing against Xin Zhao alongside an enchanter with some extra heals like a Soraka, you'll probably be thinking about uninstalling. This champion is performing exceptionally well at all ranks so far this patch, so if you haven't been perma-banning him or playing him already, you should probably get on with it. Now let's stop talking about Xin Zhao before I get too tilted, and let's move on to the mid lane. The first choice of the day is going to be Ahri. What a difference the update has made to this champion. She's gone from being completely forgotten about to being one of the most contested and picked or banned champions this patch. The new Ahri update has completely revolutionised this champion, and she's turned into a real threat from that mid lane. Ahri's damage is now far more consistent and evenly spread rather than being tied to her charm. This opens up so many avenues in lane and in the early game to get that snowball started earlier, and you can seriously just start popping people with barely any items. The ultimate charges have really changed the game too. Now you can gain so many dashes in a teamfight if you're consistently taking part in enemy takedowns. Previously, you were borderline useless if your ultimate was down, and especially so if you missed your charm, whereas now you can fight for what seems like forever. Ahri's versatility has completely changed with this update, and she feels like a far more complete champion. Whether it's taking out your enemies in the early game, carrying fights in the mid game, or just being far more useful in teamfights, Ahri is without a doubt so much better this patch, and if you haven't tried her yet, you seriously should. Ahri is sitting at one of the highest win rates so far in the entire game, so it may be time you get onto it and abuse it. Another mid laner with an insanely surprising win rate at the moment is Qiyana. The reason I say surprising is because she's actually very hard to play. High skill ceiling and mechanically demanding champions don't always actually have the best win rate, because it's actually a select few players that can actually play them optimally. However, Qiyana's win rate is actually pretty nuts, especially at Plat Plus. Now, despite receiving a few nerfs here and there along the way, Qiyana is still doing Qiyana things. It doesn't matter how much you nerf her sustain or her regen or anything else really, because the fact is, when she has her ultimate, she can one-shot you before you even have a chance to react. Qiyana is all about aggression. Now pre-6 and before your first back, it's hit or miss. Sometimes you may be able to get an early kill and sometimes you may struggle. But after that first base, that serrated Dirk and level 6 all-in is just so unbelievably huge and should allow you to take out most matchups in a pinch. Qiyana's kill threat in lane is OP, but so is her ability to roam. Her ganks are insanely punishing, and with such high damage she can easily turn fights and burst down enemies, transitioning into a very hasty snowball. The fact that we can say all of this and we don't even need to mention just how strong her ultimate is. Qiyana's skill ceiling and fairly steep learning curve make her highly dependent on her pilot, but if you can get the hang of her, she's an exceptional pick, especially so in this patch. So Corki actually received nerfs to his package coming into this patch, but he's still excelling at the things he's been doing for most of this season. Ever since his hybrid Ludens build came along, he's just been dominating games, especially in higher elos. Corki's relatively low win rate does not show just how potent he is, as in a lot of ratings people don't power farm and get to that 3 item auto win point, and instead try and follow those early fights and lose a lot of them in the process. Hybrid Corki's mid game is arguably one of the best in the entire game at the moment. The second you get that trio of Hydra, Muramana and Ludens, you can simply just one-shot everyone in just a few rockets. Corki's passive is another huge reason as to why he's just so damn strong. Now, although its cooldown and its refresh timer got nerfed, it's still very abusable, and if you play around it when it comes to objectives, you've got a massive way to win fights and get those dragons, and then more dragons equals more wins. Corki is just as strong as ever, and I don't think this is going to change anytime soon. His AoE cleave and burst is just stupidly high, and if you maximise his gold income and spike as soon as you can without doubt carry those games by yourself this patch. Onto the bottom lane now, and the first champion we're going to talk about is Jhin. We've spoken about Jhin in so many videos recently, but it's just because he's so unbelievably potent. Jhin's been dominating that bot lane since the start of the season, and although other marksmen have come and gone, he's still remained in that same spot. Jhin continues to thrive off the same things patch after patch at the moment. Strength in his itemization being solid, he works well at all stages of the game, making him really consistent, and he works well into almost all team compositions and with most supports too. He also doesn't even really have many poor matchups. To top all of those reasons off though, his kit and his playstyle work fantastically well into the modern League of Legends style of playing. Jhin can deal with all of the different types of OP champions in the meta. He's got the close range burst, he's got the long range pick potential and contribution with his ultimate, and he's got high movement speed and mobility with Gale Force, and all of these things just make him work in the current game state. Jhin also has a pretty high skill ceiling too, meaning in the right hands there's even more this champion can achieve. He really is a fantastic choice this season, so make sure you get playing him if you haven't already. Jinx is another champion who's been thriving since the start of this season. In pre-season it was all about Vane, and then after a few nerfs to her directly and her itemization, Jinx has just overtaken her as queen of that AD carry role. Jinx is probably one of the best champions in the game right now, as she just ticks so many boxes and is so hard to beat when she's fed. Jinx in the Enchanter meta is truly terrifying, and if you can't get near her and burst her down, she'll just farm your entire team with her resets. She excels in 2v2s in lane and absolutely slaps in teamfights. She melts structures, she melts towers and dragons with ease, and she cleans up fights like no other with her long range nuke and movement speed. Jinx also has fairly flexible itemization too. You've got your Gale Force rapid fire build, you've got Kraken Slayer and Hurricane, you've got loads of options with tons of damage, and she really does feel like the champion to beat right now, especially after Vayne and Caitlyn have fallen down the pecking order since their respective nerfs. Now there's only one more AD carry that feels even more difficult to get hold of right now, and that's the latest one, Zeri. Zeri has absolutely taken the Summoner's Rift by storm recently, and although her release was a little bit 50-50, now that people have figured her out and her itemization, she's unbelievably good. Zeri is all about her movement speed and mobility alongside her relentless DPS. Zeri's damage is so constant. There's very few gaps in her output due to the consistent use of her Q, but she also has really high burst windows, especially after using her E or her ultimate. Zeri is proving to be an amazing AD carry when played by someone who can utilize her high skill ceiling. There are tons of things to think about when playing her and maximizing her effectiveness, but overall, as long as you can move well and keep hitting those Qs, you're going to have a fantastic time. Zeri is sitting at one of the highest ban rates in the game so far this patch, and that just shows how strong she is in itself. The most popular and the most successful build is fairly unusual too. It revolves around Triforce and Runar's Hurricane, but then it almost follows a Bruiser type path consisting of Titanic Hydra, Black Cleaver and Wit's End. This not only ramps up her damage significantly, but it also makes her kind of bulky and relatively hard to take down as well. If you don't have much CC when playing against this champion, you're going to have a seriously hard time shutting her down, as she's just so damn slippery. Finally, it's time to talk about support now, and Janna is definitely having a fantastic time so far since her mini rework. The changes she received have really just made her so much more punishing to play against, and now she excels at everything she did before, but better. Janna's disengage feels so much harder to play against now. The Q travel time has made a massive difference, and it's actually quite infuriating to play against this ability. Janna's ultimate now actually provides some quick and helpful healing rather than solely being used as a pushback, and overall her shields and the rest of her kit just feels so much smoother. Janna's synergy with Glacial Augment is also making her super effective, and this rune just feels amazing on her. Janna is a great pick in the current state of the game at the moment too. With such a diverse range of champions being picked, Janna can basically play into anything. In most lanes she excels or goes even, and out of lane there's not too much that she can't deal with. Janna is sitting at one of the highest win rates in that support role, and keeping her as a very consistent pick into most drafts. Blitzcrank is taking the next spot in this list just mainly due to how incredibly impactful he can be against this enchanting meta. So many squishy targets, and this just means he can keep that constant threat in lane and get fed off those enemies who just die in one rotation when he lands his Q. Blitzcrank's ability to roam and snowball other lanes also makes him far stronger in this meta. Supports are roaming so much these days and effectively becoming second junglers, meaning if you've got the kit that allows you to roam more impactfully, you're even better in this meta. Blitzcrank's strength in lane is an obvious reason as to why he's so popular, but the fact that all it takes throughout the course of games is just one lucky hook and you've basically won a team fight and maybe an objective or two too, means he's so easy to win with. Even in a game where you're really far behind, you can still come out on top by repeatedly catching enemies out and picking them off easily. Overall, Blitzcrank is a super solid pick if you want to put teammates on your back and carry games with just one ability. Lulu is our third pick for today and our final pick for this video. Lulu has always been an amazing champion in the majority of League of Legends seasons, and especially so in those when hyper carries are in the mix. Lulu is just designed to make AD carries shine, and in this meta with so much long range damage coming in, she's absolutely spot on. Enchanters have really cemented their place in the Rift this season, and Lulu is probably the best or at least one of the best enchanters in the game. Lulu's kit is purely designed to keep people alive, without her obvious way of healing like a Soraka does. Instead, she focuses on shields. Lulu's Polymorph and her ultimate are also some of the best abilities in the game. Polymorph has the ability to shut down any specific high threat target trying to murder her poor Kog'Maw, and this alone makes her infinitely more impactful. Lulu doesn't actually have many lanes right now which cause her problems either. She mostly struggles against lanes which can outpoke and out-harass her, forcing her out of lane and making her practically useless. Right now though, everyone is basically playing enchanters, and those that aren't are playing CC heavy champions like Leona and Nautilus. Lulu beats all these types of lanes with her protection and her ability to shut down incoming threats, so in the majority of games, she's always going to come out on top. So to sum up, Lulu is just the best of a very potent bunch of enchanters, and she works so well with hyper carries, just making her one of the best supports in this meta. We really don't see this changing anytime soon. So thanks everyone for watching our best champions for every role video. We hope you agreed with the majority of our choices and let us know who you think deserved a place in this list. That's all from us here at Mobalytics, and as always, take care.